Recording in progress.
The Succulent Selection College Basketball Podcast is next with me, Sniffy McGee. Welcome to the Selection College Basketball Podcast with me, Sniffy McGee. Today we're going to be discussing the power conferences, the conference races, the bubble teams, the bad losses, the good wins, and everything else that's coming up as we are now 4 weeks from Selection Sunday. We are almost there. We are very close. And now every game seems to matter more and more. So let's just get right into it and start off in the ACC with the first thing that comes to mind. Who had a good win? The Miami Hurricanes had a good win, beating NC State 77-76 in a game that felt like NC State was gonna win. Miami improves to 9-3 in the conference, while NC State drops to 9-4. Miami was kind of like somewhere on the bubble, on the good side of the bubble. They've just improved their status. NC State continues to slide a little further down in the pecking order. Will Wade said his team is soft. They probably are. They're just a jump shooting team. The next team that had a good win is Louisville, defeating Baylor in a non-conference game on Saturday. And moves Louisville to 19-6 on the year. Baylor is dead in the water. They are dead. Virginia also won a non-conference game there over Ohio State. They improved to 22-3, and they are looking like a solid 4 seed. Although the last couple weeks they have been winning, but not winning very impressively, just kind of getting by in every game. We saw number 4 Duke take down Clemson 67-54 in a game that could have moved Clemson into a tie with Duke in the ACC. Instead, Duke gets the win, improves to 12-1, first place. In the bad losses column now, the one that really sticks to mind is SMU, losing at Syracuse 79-78. They had a double-digit lead in this game, and still they found a way to lose, and they are sliding further and further down. I don't think they're in trouble yet, but you got to get wins at this time of the year. You got to keep winning games. And here is a team that I believe is done and buried. Stanford goes to Wake Forest and loses 68-63, and I think that is the end of their potential at-large bid in the ACC. They dropped to 5-8. Wake Forest improves to 4-8. Not much better. Why don't we go now take a look at the ACC standings? My preseason pick, not really a stretch. I had Duke back in October winning this, and they are currently on top at 12-1. Virginia only one game back at 10-2. Clemson 10-3, but they now don't have the tiebreaker. Miami surprisingly is sitting at 9-3. So I'm saying right now, another team that took a very bad loss was Virginia Tech. They were winning the game at the half, and then they just died against Florida State. Florida State beat them so bad in that second half. I'm surprised they even made it home. But we'll move now on to the Big 12. Let's take a look at some of the scores from yesterday. Who got the big wins? Who got the bad losses? Let's see. Well, the biggest win, obviously, in the Big 12 yesterday was the overtime victory by by Texas Tech over the number 1 Arizona Wildcats. It probably moves Arizona not off the 1 line, but down, probably behind Michigan and Duke. They're probably the 3rd number 1 seed now instead of the overall number 1 seed, as they've dropped now 2 in a row. It gets tough. It gets tough at this time. The schedule probably doesn't get much easier. Jerome Tang called out Kansas State, and they actually fought a little more than normal in this game. They only lose to Houston at Houston by 14. So I guess that's kind of a win. That's almost a win for Jerome Tang's team. Iowa State completely destroyed Kansas, 74-56. Kansas may actually be better without Peterson. BYU survives in overtime against Colorado at home, and now I read that they lost Richie Saunders for the year. BYU just hasn't been able to punch up at all. They beat the teams that they should beat, but they never beat anybody that's better than them. They seem to be pretty upset proof, though, I would say. They're just not. They look like the team from. They look very similar to the team from last year. They'll probably go about the same distance. Like Sweet 16 is about as far as they can go because once they got to play one of the top seeds, I don't believe they have any chance of beating them. We probably saw the final death knell in Baylor, although they're probably dead anyway, as they lose the non-conference game to Louisville, 82-71. That drops them to 13-12 on the year. It's a very disappointing year for Baylor, but when your point guard decides to leave you after committing to after you pay him, and then they go, no, I'm leaving. Robert Wright goes to BYU. It's too late in the year really to replace that guy, so you're just kind of stuck. It's going to be a bad year. What are you going to do? And then in the true bubble game, you had TCU in overtime take down Oklahoma State 95-92. TCU getting very close. They might be on the right side of the bubble. Oklahoma State's probably on the wrong side of the bubble. They had that big win where they stormed the court, and since then I think they've lost every game since. They're 4-8 now in the conference. TCU is 6-6. And another team that keeps sliding down. After UCF beat Texas Tech, stormed the court, have they won a game since? They lose to West Virginia 74-67. Another team, they were winning this game, and then they just couldn't score anymore, and that was the end of them. So the UCF has got to be sliding, in my opinion, closer and closer into that like maybe 10 seed area now. And once you get into that double digit seed, you're very close to being on the bubble or being sent to Dayton. This didn't seem like it was going to happen a couple weeks ago, but it has. Now, my preseason pick was Houston to win this conference, and while that didn't look very good early, because Arizona just looked like they were never going to lose a game, I now look up at the standings, and in first place, Kelvin Sampson and the Houston Cougars at 11-1, one game ahead of Arizona, 2 games ahead of Kansas and Iowa State. I think tomorrow night, though, Houston goes to Iowa State, so that should be a good game, and for my future, I'm going to have to root for Houston. That'll be a good game. It's going to be a tough one, but Houston, Kelvin Sampson's only lost 5 games in 3 years in the Big 12, counting the tournament. Counting the Big 12 tournament, he has only lost 5 games in 3 years. I will just keep saying Houston, Houston, Houston. So now let's move on to the Big 10. Who had the big wins and the big losses yesterday in the Big 10? Well, we saw Michigan win 86-56 after having against UCLA after only having a 2-point lead at the halftime. It was 40-38 at the half, and it looked like UCLA might cover the 16.5 point spread. But then they managed to score 18 points only in the second half and take a 30-point beatdown. Michigan has now moved up to the #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament in 4 weeks. Another nice win was Nebraska, 68-49 over Northwestern. Northwestern, for the second straight game, played very well with a top 10 team for the first half and then just ran out of gas in the second half. I guess that's what bad teams do. They're 2-13 now in the Big 10. I feel like they're better than that, but they're just not able to win these games. They just run out of gas. Nebraska moves to 11-3, 22-3 overall, and they look like they're a solid. They're going to be a 2 or a 3 seed. Here's another team that's surging here. We got the big one coming up next week between Purdue and Michigan, as Purdue wins 78-57 at Iowa. As Iowa's taking a couple losses now in a row. They're sliding down. Nowhere, not near the bubble yet, but they're 8-6 in the Big 10, and they're finally having a hard time coming down the stretch. Ohio State on the bubble takes the loss to Virginia. They could have used that one, but I think they're on the wrong side of the bubble, probably like a first 4 out team right now. But still a little time left. There's times left to get some wins. Very bad season for Oregon. They're 9-16 overall, 2-12 in the Big Ten after beating Penn State 83-72. Nate Biddle has let me down so many times betting wise this season that I don't even want to see his games on TV. I don't want to this. I just pretend this program doesn't even exist for the next month. So we go into the standings, and now remember, back in October, I picked Purdue to win this league, but the best value I said on the board was on Michigan at plus 430. So I took both. Michigan sits at 14-1. They have a 2-game lead over Illinois, who defeated Indiana today. And Purdue is sitting at 11-3, 2 games back. They are going to have to win this game against Michigan. It's in West Lafayette, so they got a shot. Purdue's playing a little better now. They survived that scare at Nebraska where they had the huge lead, blew it, managed to win it in overtime. Maybe that gives them a little momentum going forward. I don't think Nebraska, who is also 11-3, is a threat to win this conference. Michigan State, Wisconsin 10-4. I just think they're too far back with only 6 games to go. This seems like it's a 3-team race between Michigan, Illinois, and Purdue. We'll get a little more. If Michigan beats Purdue, they may be on their way to cruising to a regular season Big Ten Conference championship. Let's move ahead now to the Big East. Big East has been definitely down this year. Looks like a three-team bid conference. UConn beats Georgetown 79-75 at home. UConn just hasn't looked very they just look like they're going through the motions, just winning. They're winning all these games, but it's just they're not impressive wins. They're just like, all right, we beat this team, beat that team, move along to the next game. Their only losses in conferences to St. John's. UConn sits at 4-1. St. John's sits at 13-1 after beating Providence 79-69 in the Bryce Hopkins return game, and he took a hard foul that started a brawl, and then we ended up with 6 ejections during the brawl, 1 more ejection after the game, later on in the game on a flagrant foul. So it was a game where everyone just was very angry. People were throwing punches. I like it. Villanova defeats Creighton. Creighton's terrible this year, 13-13, 7-8 in the Big East. Villanova definitely a tournament team with an 80-69 win, and then in a meaningless game, Xavier defeated Marquette 96-88. My pick in the preseason to win this conference was UConn, and they are sitting at, what are they, 14-1? Yeah, 14-1. St. John's 13-1, and the only other team that has any type of shot at winning this conference is Villanova at 11-3, but I don't believe they can get far enough up there. Seton Hall sits in 4th in this conference at 7-7. They can't afford to take any any losses really against anybody anywhere near them, as they're probably in the second 4 out, like in that 5-8 category. They still have a game against UConn and St. John's. They're going to have to win one, maybe even both of those. Maybe it started off so good for Shaheen, and it's just the team wasn't that talented, and finally it just they're just worn out, and they're winning some games, but they got Butler. They have Butler later on today, and as we record this on a Sunday afternoon, they have to win this game. Every loss you take at this point for them is just going to push them further and further back. Can't take any more losses. So it's 17-8 overall, 7-7 in conference. I can't believe that's 4th place in this conference. Jesus Christ. All right, let's move ahead to the SEC conference, where there was some activity in this one. Let's click on there. Florida handled Kentucky 92-83 at home to move to 10-2 and remain in first place alone. Kentucky had a shot. If they would have won this game, they would have been tied with Florida atop the conference. I had Kentucky winning this conference before the season started. That pick looked horrendous about 6 weeks ago. At least they've gotten to 8-4 and made my pick look respectable. So I'm not as upset. It looked like it was going to be they might miss the tournament. That's not the case anymore. Florida looks like they could repeat as national champs again. This game it was basically sat around like 8 to 12 points the entire game. Kentucky never had a chance to win this game, it felt like. Vanderbilt beats Texas A&M, who is free falling, 82-69. Texas A&M, remember they were in first place. What were they, 6-1 at one point, 7-1 in the conference? Now they're 7-5, and Buckyball may end up missing this tournament if they don't. They got to get some wins because they're falling. They're fading. They're fading quick. They got to get some wins, but they are not fading as much as the next team I want to talk about. Arkansas defeats Auburn 88-75, dropping Auburn to 5-7 in the conference and 14-11 overall with 6 games remaining. Auburn better be real careful because I don't believe a team in the last 20 plus years has made the NCAA tournament being only 2 games over 500. So you have 6 games left in the conference. You're 14-11. If you go 3-3 in those last 6 games, you're 17-14 heading into the SEC tournament. If you're a one and done in the SEC tournament, you finish the season 17-15, and you may not be going dancing because I haven't seen a team get in 20 plus years at 17-15. Arkansas, meanwhile, moves up to 9-3. Another thing about Auburn, remember a couple weeks ago how great they said Stephen Pro was really stepping into the job? Well, you can't go from a 1 seed last year, made the Final Four, and drop to where you might not even make the tournament. So he's got to go 3-3 minimum, and then he's going to have to win a game in the first round of the SEC tournament. But he better go 4-2 to give himself some breathing room. So we'll talk about that though later on this week. We'll see who they got coming up in the next week or two, because every one of these games, doesn't matter who they play, is very important. And it's getting the same way for this next team, Georgia, as they lose at Oklahoma 94-78 after having a halftime lead, come out in the second half and just get completely blown out. Georgia's now 5-7 in the SEC, and they are dropping down. This looked like a surefire NCAA team earlier in the year, and now they are slowly moving down toward the bubble. Seems like a lot of the teams that needed wins just didn't get them, and not too many teams that needed them. Like Oklahoma's 3-9 in the SEC. They are not making the dance. But it seems like any team that needed a win could not get one. Speaking of 3-9 in the conference, Ole Miss loses at home to their rival Mississippi State 90-78. Chris Beard cannot be happy. This does not seem like a Chris Beard team. He looks unhappy the whole year. He's just thrown his hands up and said, okay, do whatever you guys want. And we'll just move on to next year. Alabama stays somewhat in the race at 8-4 with an 89-75 win against South Carolina. And then another good bubble game. Texas gets a big win at Missouri. Missouri looked like they were moving into surefire NCAA tournament on the right side of the bubble, but now they just take a home loss to Texas. So Texas will move ahead of them. I think Texas was in anyway, but this will solidify them a little more, especially with all the teams around him that we've mentioned on the show losing. So this was a good weekend for Texas. This was a bad weekend for teams like Missouri. Bad weekend for Georgia. Auburn, it's getting to be a bad weekend. Texas A&M, not a good weekend. Now let's just check out the standings. We know Florida's on top at 10-2. Arkansas 1 game back at 9-3. And then Vanderbilt, after that undefeated start, is now drops to 8-4. Is 8-4 only in the conference. I don't see them as a threat. Tennessee 8-4, Alabama 8-4, Kentucky 8-4. Yeah, this is Florida or Arkansas's conference, really. Someone else to move up there is going to be hard. You look all the way at the bottom, just like last year, it's LSU and South Carolina. They look out. So we will be back Tuesday night for the next show. We were recapping some of the action that'll happen, more of this bubble talk, more of that, more of this. My name is Sniffy McGee. This is the Succulent Selection Show, and I am reminding you to get succulent with me.